Cannabis was never just a plant. It was never just a vibe, never just a medicine, never just a vice. It was a test, and most people still have no idea they're being tested. They keep asking whether weed is good or bad, healing or harmful, spiritual or toxic, as if the plant owes them a simple answer. It doesn't. It never did. Cannabis does not bend to your opinion. It does not care what you believe about it. It amplifies what is already alive inside you. That is why some people touch it and feel wonder, while others touch it and meet fear. That is why one person calls it peace and another calls it paranoia. The plant is not choosing sides. It is turning up the volume. And that is exactly why this conversation is bigger than weed. Because the real danger was never the leaf. The real danger was always the unprepared self. Long before modern culture turned cannabis into a product, a brand, a mood board, a coping tool, a late-night habit, it was handled like a key, not a toy, not an accessory, a key. And the people who used it knew something most people today have forgotten. You do not touch a key like that unless you are ready for the door. Ancient traditions did not approach cannabis casually because they understood a law modern people keep violating. Access without readiness becomes danger. In ancient India, cannabis was linked to Shiva, the force of destruction and transformation, the one who burns illusion so truth can breathe. His devotees did not smoke to chill. They smoked to die before dying, to let the ego loosen its grip, to step into the fire and come back less false. The chillum was not there to decorate identity. It was there to threaten it. In Taoist alchemy, cannabis was not about escaping the body. It was used with precision, blended carefully, brought into systems meant to refine energy, deepen stillness, and open the inner ear. It was not there to dull perception. It was there to sharpen it, but only when the vessel was aligned. If the inner field was unstable, the plant did not bless that instability. It exposed it. Among Sufi mystics, hashish appeared in certain circles not as entertainment, but as a dangerous ally, something that could soften the walls of self and open a person toward divine presence, but only under the shadow of discipline. Even there, the warning was clear. Intoxication can imitate awakening. A flooded feeling is not the same as union. A beautiful state can still leave the soul unchanged. That warning never went away. People just stopped listening. In Rastafari, ganja was never meant to be a private escape hatch from life. It was prayed over, shared, held inside reasonings, words, smoke, scripture, silence, presence. It was woven into a container strong enough to hold what the herb might reveal. It was not used to forget the world. It was used to remember the divine moving through it. That is what modern culture erased. Not just the ritual, the meaning of the ritual. Because ritual was never empty theater. It was never spiritual decoration. It was preparation. It was how you cleaned the lens before looking through it. It was how you stabilized the mind before expanding it. It was how you approached the threshold with respect instead of entitlement. And this is where the fracture begins. Because the modern world took something ancient, sacred, and demanding and flattened it into convenience. The sacrament became a souvenir. The portal became a product. The initiation became a habit. Now it is packaged like candy, marketed like self-care, consumed between notifications, mixed with doom scrolling, swallowed by the dopamine economy, and stripped of almost everything that once gave it direction. The plant did not lose its power. We lost the container, and once the container is gone, sensation becomes the center. But sensation without structure does not lead to wisdom. It leads to drift. It leads to indulgence. It leads to people walking into a temple with muddy feet, then acting shocked when all they meet inside is distortion. This is why the old binary is useless. Weed is not simply the hero or the villain. It is an amplifier. If you are grounded, it can deepen stillness. If you are fractured, it can magnify the crack. If you are honest, it can reveal. If you are avoidant, it can become one more sophisticated way to hide. The plant is not the answer. It is the mirror. And the mirror is ruthless. It reflects your fear, your grief, your hidden compulsions, your unresolved pain, your buried hunger, your unspoken shame, the questions you keep dodging, the parts of you that only come alive in the dark. It does not care about your aesthetic. It does not care about your spiritual language. It does not care how conscious you say you are. It cares about what is actually there. That is why preparation mattered so much in older traditions. Fasting, prayer, silence, cleansing, solitude, reverence. These were not superstitions from primitive people. They were technologies of readiness. They understood something modern culture still refuses to admit. A mind should be stable before it is expanded. A door should not be opened by someone who has no intention of walking through what it reveals. Because the door opens both ways. It opens toward beauty, yes, but it also opens toward shadow. And shadow is where most people panic. There is a reason so many people smoke and suddenly feel anxious, paranoid, exposed, watched, cracked open, too aware of themselves, too aware of everything. Most dismiss it as the wrong strain, too much THC, bad chemistry, bad luck. Sometimes those factors matter. But what if that is not the deepest layer of what is happening? What if the plant is not malfunctioning at all? What if it is doing exactly what it has always done? Cutting through surface noise, stripping away performance, bringing hidden material to the front, letting you feel what you were already carrying under the mask. The anxiety was not always created in that moment. Sometimes it was revealed in that moment. The plant did not write the fear. It put a microphone in front of it. That is why the shadow becomes unavoidable here. Call it Jungian shadow. Call it the underworld. Call it the rejected self. The label matters less than the mechanism. There are pieces of the psyche most people spend years hiding from. Grief they never metabolized. Rage they swallowed to stay lovable. Shame they built a whole personality around outrunning. Old wounds that hardened into identity. Cannabis often does not create those things from nowhere. It makes them impossible to ignore. It is an amplifier, not a novelist. It does not invent the song. It turns up what is already playing. And for many people, what is already playing is pain. This is the part the wellness culture hates, because revelation does not market as well as relaxation. But every serious spiritual path knows the same law. Real awakening does not begin in the light. It begins in confrontation. It begins in the underworld. It begins when something strips away the pleasant story and shows you what still rules you from underneath. Discomfort is not always a sign that something is wrong. Sometimes discomfort is the signal that something real is finally being seen. That spiraling self-consciousness after a hit, that sudden pressure in the chest, that feeling that the false self is losing control. That can be terrifying. But terror is not always the enemy. Sometimes it is feedback. Sometimes it is the ego's guard dogs barking because the gates have been touched. Sometimes it is the fortress panicking because the walls are no longer holding. Modern culture gives people almost no framework for that. No elder, no witness, no sacred context. No one to say, stay with it, look carefully, this is not punishment, this is exposure. So people end up alone in a room, heart racing, drowning in noise, staring at a ceiling while their artificial self starts to flicker. And because they were never taught how to meet that moment, they call the whole experience bad and learn nothing from it. But the encounter was not fake. The encounter was real. That is what makes it dangerous. Not because the plant is evil, because truth without preparation can feel like attack. Esoteric traditions understood altered states as openings in more than one direction. When the filters thin, perception shifts. The subtle body becomes more sensitive. The internal field becomes more porous. And what becomes visible is not limited to nice material. Old residue rises. Emotional debris rises. The hidden architecture of the psyche lights up. If your inner world is chaotic, cannabis does not organize the chaos, it amplifies it. If your vessel is clear, it may sharpen intuition. If your vessel is crowded, it may magnify noise until you mistake noise for revelation. That is why spiritual hygiene matters, not as a trendy phrase, as law, breathwork, fasting, prayer, chanting, cold exposure, time in silence, time in nature, honest self-inquiry, nervous system regulation. These are not cute extras for spiritual branding. They are ways of cleaning the room before turning on the lights, because cannabis does not clean the room. It turns on the lights. And whatever is in there will greet you. Think of the subtle body like an instrument. When it is tuned, the plant can draw out resonance, stillness, signal, strange beauty. When it is coated in static, the plant does not magically produce harmony. It amplifies the distortion. Then people say they are receiving messages, but they are really drowning in their own internal clutter. They feel more, but they are not necessarily seeing more. Intensity is not clarity. Volume is not wisdom. And this is where another trap appears: false light, spiritual inflation, the ancient danger of mistaking sensation for truth. Cannabis can make thoughts feel profound. It can make music feel holy. It can make synchronicities glow. It can make you feel expanded, deep, open, cracked into cosmic significance. But a powerful feeling is not the same thing as transformation. A high can mimic transcendence the way a mirror can mimic a doorway. It shows something real, then tempts you to worship the image instead of walking the path. That is how people start confusing insight with embodiment. They touch a moment of depth and assume they have become deep. They feel peace for 2 hours and assume they are healed. They write beautiful thoughts in a journal and assume their life has changed. It hasn't, not yet. Not unless something becomes flesh after the feeling fades. This is why the old traditions never glorified the state itself. They asked what it demanded. They knew access is cheap compared to embodiment. A glimpse is easy. Integration is rare. Anybody can have a moment. Not everybody will let that moment reorder how they speak, how they love, how they handle conflict, how they sit with boredom, how they serve, how they carry themselves when no one is watching. The high can open the door. It cannot walk through your life for you. And if you keep standing in the doorway, telling yourself you have arrived, the doorway becomes a prison. Then comes the ego in spiritual clothing. The person who starts sounding awakened, talking like a mystic, quoting wisdom, performing depth, but whose relationships remain shallow, whose patterns remain untouched, whose wounds become poetic instead of healed. This is not uncommon. It is almost standard now. The plant becomes a prop in a performance of becoming. The person becomes attached not only to cannabis, but to the identity created around having seen things. They begin to confuse sensitivity with superiority. They become fluent in spiritual language while remaining unchanged at the level that matters. This is false light, not darkness pretending to be darkness. Illusion, pretending to be illumination. Gold-colored fog. It feels bright. It leaves no backbone. This is why discernment is not optional. Discernment is the blade. It is the inner law. It is the part of you that can look at even a profound experience and ask, was this signal or static? Was this revelation or projection? Was this truth, or was this what my ego desperately wanted to hear? Not every deep feeling is wisdom. Not every thought that appears in the high is sacred. Not every synchronicity is a message. Not every sensation of openness is the presence of truth. If you do not sharpen that inner blade, the plant will not save you from your own fantasies. It will amplify them. And this is where the symbol of Thoth becomes useful, not as mythology for decoration. As a reminder, Thoth represents sacred measure, hidden record, inner law, discernment, the kind of knowledge that refuses to be handed to the careless. He is not the mascot of secret knowledge. He is the warning attached to it. Truth must be prepared for. Wisdom must be earned in the nervous system, not just admired in the mind. To touch a key without the discipline to hold what it opens is to invite distortion. The ancients understood that knowledge without readiness is not liberation, it is destabilization. And cannabis lives inside that same law. It amplifies, it reveals, it opens, but it does not choose for you whether what enters will become clarity or confusion. That depends on the vessel. The plant responds less to your intention than your actual condition. You can say you want truth, but if what you really want is comfort, escape, or a more spiritual version of self-avoidance, the plant will meet that too. It will expose the split between what you claim and what you are doing. This is why intention alone is not enough. People say, "My intention was good." That means very little. A sincere person can still be inwardly chaotic. A curious person can still be ungrounded. A seeker can still be full of spiritual hunger and psychological dishonesty. Cannabis does not bow to wishful thinking. It responds to alignment, readiness, containment, and the actual state of the inner field. That is why boundaries matter. Silence matters. Phones off, noise off, stimulation off. Earth under your feet, breath steady, mind clear, question honest, body not overloaded, space held. Without that, the modern user walks straight into fragmentation and calls it healing. And this gets even more dangerous in isolation. Across cultures, substances that alter consciousness were rarely treated as a purely private affair, because those traditions understood something modern individualism forgot. When power opens you, you need a container strong enough to hold what pours out. Community matters, witness matters, circle matters. In Rastafari reasonings, the herb is not the center, truth is the center. The herb serves the search. In many indigenous settings, whether cannabis is central or not, the principle remains the same. The journey belongs to the container. Song, prayer, fire, elder, silence, shared intention. The circle keeps the experience from becoming a private religion of distortions. Because alone, everything can feel true. Alone, your fear can masquerade as prophecy. Your projection can masquerade as revelation. Your half-formed insight can harden into doctrine before anyone wiser has a chance to test it. The circle interrupts delusion. It reflects you back. It asks, "What did you see?" And more importantly, "What will you do with it?" Without that witness, insight often evaporates or mutates into self-importance. That is why sacred container is not an optional accessory. It is structural protection. Even now, in modern life, this principle still applies. You do not need a jungle temple to create reverence. You need honesty, a few grounded people, clear intention, silence before, reflection after, a refusal to turn the whole thing into background entertainment. You can create a small chamber of truth anywhere, but if there is no chamber, no boundary, no witness, then the plant floats into the chaos of your existing habits and magnifies them. Then the same herb that could have become a teacher becomes fog. This is why the question is not only what are you smoking, it is who are you when you smoke? What state are you entering from? What have you cleared? What are you avoiding? What surrounds the experience? What follows it? Who can challenge the story you tell yourself about what happened? Because if nobody can challenge it, you may not be awakening. You may just be performing awakening in private. And this is where the modern world becomes impossible to ignore. Look at how people actually use weed now. Not in temples, not in sacred fasts, not in disciplined solitude, in bedrooms lit by screens, after draining workdays, in apartments full of overstimulation, in bodies carrying exhaustion, low-grade dread, unprocessed grief, social isolation, nervous system burnout, emotional suppression, pornified attention spans, and 1,000 tiny cuts from a life that never slows down. Then they call it self-care. They light up after doom scrolling for an hour. They inhale while binge-watching content designed to keep them numb. They smoke because the week crushed them, because the house is too quiet, because they do not want to feel lonely, because their mind will not stop, because they are tired of being tired, because it feels easier to blur than to confront. And that is where the fantasy of healing gets dangerous, because many people are not using cannabis to deepen truth. They are using it to postpone contact. They call it unwinding, but often it is sedation with spiritual branding. They call it reflection, but sometimes it is just rumination in incense smoke. They call it peace, but often it is a softer form of dissociation. They say they are tuning in, while their body is actually asking them to stop running. This is not a judgment, it is a diagnosis. Modern people are starved for ritual, flooded with noise, and terrified of stillness. So they reach for something that can shift the atmosphere quickly, something that can make the edges feel less sharp, something that can give the illusion of depth without the immediate cost of real change. That is why weed fits the modern wound so perfectly. It can feel sacred enough to justify itself and soothing enough to become a loop. It can let you feel like you touch something while keeping you 1 inch away from the harder thing, which is actually changing your life, actually grieving, actually leaving what is dead, actually confronting the relationship, the habit, the mask, the fear, the emptiness, the self-betrayal. So a person smokes again and again, not always because they love the plant, but because they do not know how else to sit with themselves. This is how the mirror becomes a hiding place. This is how a tool becomes an identity. This is how people start calling the fog calm. This is how they mistake dullness for healing. But healing is not numbness. Healing is increased clarity, increased capacity, increased honesty, increased ability to remain present without needing to chemically edit every corner of your internal weather. If weed is being used to help you face truth, that is one thing. If it is being used to help you avoid the moment truth knocks, that is something else entirely. And deep down, most people know the difference. They feel it in the silence right before they reach for it. So eventually the real question arrives. Not did the plant show you something? It probably did. The question is, what changed? Did you become more honest, more grounded, more loving, less reactive, more able to sit in ordinary life without needing a cloud between you and your own mind? Did you take the insight and embody it? Or did you just collect another experience and add it to the museum of your unfinished becoming? Integration is where the path gets real, not in the peak, not in the vision, not in the poetry of the high. In the morning after, in traffic, in conflict, in heartbreak, in boredom, in routine, in the strange holiness of ordinary life. Can you carry clarity there? Can you stay awake there? Can you remember what the mirror showed without having to stare into it every night? That is the test. Cannabis is not the destination. It may be a mirror, a compass, a door, a signal flare, a threshold, but it is not the destination. The destination is embodiment, inner fire, self-honesty, mature discernment, a soul that no longer confuses access with arrival, a life that can hold truth without needing to be intoxicated to touch it. That is why, eventually, every real seeker reaches the same threshold. The tool must be put in its place. The teacher must not become the crutch. The mirror must not become the identity. The smoke must not replace the flame. Because the deepest lesson the plant can ever give you is not that you need it forever. It is that what you were searching for through it was always trying to awaken within you. The stillness, the insight, the sensitivity, the contact, the sacred. None of that belongs to the leaf alone. The leaf can remind you. It cannot live your life for you. So here is the final cut. Weed is not the answer. It never was. At its best, it is an honest mirror. At its worst, it is a beautiful distraction dressed as depth. It can show you the shadow, but it cannot make you face it. It can open the door, but it cannot make you walk. It can point at truth, but it cannot force you to embody it. That part is on you, and that is where most people split. They keep chasing smoke, or they become fire. They keep performing awakening, or they live it. They keep staring at the mirror, or they finally face what it shows. If you really see it now, comment, "I choose the fire." Then subscribe. Share this with the one person still calling fog peace. And remember this line, because it is the whole warning and the whole path at once. Don't worship the smoke, become the fire.